The stars had always been beautiful from the observation deck of Station Horizon. Admiral Una Park had spent many nights here during her younger years, watching the endless darkness and wondering what secrets it held. Now, at 63 years old, she knew the answer. The darkness held monsters. The alarm had come at 3 in the morning, Earth time. Red lights flashed through every military base on the planet and across the colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. Una had been retired for 5 years, living quietly in a small house near the ocean in Busan. She had been sleeping when her old communicator, the one she kept in her drawer just in case, began to scream. "Admiral Park," the voice on the other end had said. "We need you. They're here." She had not asked who. She already knew. For 200 years, humanity had been part of the galactic community. They had met dozens of alien species, traded with some, and formed friendships with others. But there was always one name that made everyone go quiet: the Dominion of Krath. An empire that had existed for 10,000 years. An empire that had conquered every species it had ever met. An empire that had never, not once, known defeat. And now 5,000 of their warships sat at the edge of the Sol system. Una arrived at Station Horizon 6 hours after the alarm. The station was chaos. Officers ran through hallways shouting orders. Screens showed images of the Krath fleet, massive ships shaped like black daggers, each one capable of destroying a city with a single shot. The sight would have terrified most people. Una simply studied them with cold, careful eyes. "Admiral on deck!" someone shouted, and the room went silent. General Minho Cho walked toward her. He was an old friend, one of the few people who had been there during first contact 2 centuries ago. His hair was white now, and his face was lined with age, but his eyes were still sharp. "Una," he said, "thank you for coming." "Did I have a choice?" she asked. He almost smiled. "No, you didn't." They walked together to the command center, where a dozen officers waited around a large holographic display. The Krath fleet floated in the air before them, a swarm of deadly shapes. 5,217 ships, Minho said. "They dropped out of hyperspace 4 hours ago. They haven't moved since. They're waiting." "For what?" asked a young officer. "For us to panic," Una said. She walked closer to the display, studying the enemy formation. "It's a standard intimidation tactic. They want us to see how many they are. They want us to feel small. They want us to surrender before a single shot is fired." "Will we?" the young officer asked. Una turned to look at him. He was barely 25, with fear written all over his face. She did not blame him. She remembered being afraid once, long ago. But fear was a luxury humanity could not afford. "No," she said. "We will not." She turned to the display again. "Show me our fleet." The hologram shifted, and now Earth's ships appeared. 3,000 vessels, smaller than the Krath ships, but sleek and fast. They had been built in secret shipyards on the dark side of the moon, in the asteroid belt, in places the galaxy had never thought to look. For 200 years, humanity had smiled and traded and pretended to be harmless. And for 200 years, humanity had been preparing for this exact moment. Una allowed herself a small smile. They have no idea what they're walking into. Across the system, aboard the Krath flagship Eternal Conquest, High Commander Drelos watched the human response with amusement. His species was ancient, their skin gray and tough like stone, their eyes black and empty. He had commanded fleets for 300 years. He had burned worlds and enslaved billions. Humans, to him, were insects. "They are gathering their ships," one of his officers reported. 3,000 vessels. Drelos laughed. The sound was cold and hollow. 3,000? We could destroy them in an hour. These creatures are even more foolish than I thought." He leaned back in his command chair. A throne made from the bones of a species that no longer existed. Send the message. Give them the standard terms. Surrender or die. The transmission was sent. Across the Sol system, on every screen and every speaker, the voice of High Commander Dralos echoed, "People of Earth, I am High Commander Dralos of the Dominion of Krath. Your system now belongs to Overlord Vastus, ruler of 40,000 stars. You will surrender your military forces. You will surrender your government. You will provide 30% of your population for labor service to the Dominion. Resistance is foolish. Every species that has resisted us is now extinct. You have 12 hours to respond. Choose wisely." The message ended. Silence fell across Earth. In the command center of Station Horizon, the officers looked at each other with pale faces. Some were trembling. Others looked like they might be sick. The young officer from before had tears in his eyes. Only Admiral Una Park remained calm. 12 hours, Minho said quietly. "What do we do?" Una walked to the window. Outside, she could see Earth, blue and green and beautiful. She could see the lights of cities on the night side, billions of people going about their lives, unaware that their fate was being decided in this room. She thought about human history. She thought about all the wars they had fought against each other. She thought about the bombs they had built, the diseases they had survived, the disasters they had overcome. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times. And yet, here they were, still standing, still fighting. The Krath had conquered species who feared death, but humans? Humans had been dancing with death since they first crawled out of caves and looked up at the lightning. "Admiral?" Minho prompted. Una turned away from the window. Her eyes were hard now, filled with a fire that made the younger officers step back. "Tell the fleet to hold position," she said. "Do not retreat. Do not show fear. Let them come closer." "And the response to their ultimatum?" Minho asked. Una smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey. "I want them to see our faces when we answer. I want them to look into our eyes and understand exactly what kind of species they've threatened." She paused. "Prepare a ship. I'm going to address our fleet personally, and then, General, we're going to show these ancient conquerors something they've never seen before." "What's that?" Minho asked. Una's smile widened. "A species that isn't afraid to die. A species that laughs at death. A species that will burn the galaxy down before it kneels." She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. "They wanted us to feel small. They made a mistake. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. And the Dominion of Krath is about to fall very, very hard." The door closed behind her, and for the first time since the alarm had sounded, General Minho Cho felt something other than fear. He felt hope. The council chamber was filled with shouting. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat around the great circular table, their faces red with anger and fear. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others wanted to flee. To evacuate as many people as possible to the outer colonies. A few spoke of fighting, but their voices were drowned out by the chaos. Admiral Una Park stood at the back of the room, watching in silence. She had seen this before. Fear made people stupid. Fear made them forget who they were. "We cannot win," shouted Representative Dawan Kim from Korea. His hands were shaking. 5,000 ships. They have 5,000 ships. Our fleet is nothing compared to that." "Then we negotiate," said another representative. "We give them what they want. 30% of the population. It's terrible, yes, but at least the rest will survive." 30%. Una said quietly. The room went silent. All eyes turned to her. "Do you know what that means? 2 billion people. Slaves. Workers in their mines, their factories, their death camps. You would condemn 2 billion of your own people to save yourself?" Representative Kim swallowed hard. It's not about saving ourselves, it's about survival, the survival of the species. No. The voice came from the door. General Minho Cho walked in, his uniform crisp, his back straight despite his age. It's about cowardice, and I will not let cowardice destroy everything we've built. He walked to the center of the room and activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air. Ships, weapons, technology that made the representatives gasp. For 200 years, Minho said, we have prepared for this day. We knew the Krath would come eventually. Every empire expands, every empire hungers. So we smiled at the galaxy. We traded, we made friends, and in secret, we built. The images showed shipyards hidden in asteroids, factories buried deep beneath the surface of Mars, research stations floating in the clouds of Jupiter, an entire military infrastructure invisible to the galaxy. Our ships are smaller than theirs, Minho continued, but they are faster, smarter, and more advanced. We have weapons they have never seen. We have technology they cannot understand. We have spent 2 centuries studying every species that fell to the Krath, learning from their mistakes. He turned to face the council. We are not helpless. We are not prey. And we do not negotiate with slavers. The room was silent. Then, slowly, Representative Kim spoke again. And if we lose? Then we die fighting, Admiral Yuna said. She walked forward to stand beside Minho. Humanity has faced extinction before. Ice ages, plagues, wars that nearly destroyed us. We survived all of it. Not because we were the strongest or the smartest, but because we refused to give up. Because we looked death in the eye and said no. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Krath have conquered thousands of species. Do you know what all those species had in common? They were afraid. They saw the Krath fleet and they froze. They surrendered. They hoped that cooperation would save them. It never did. The Krath don't want partners. They want slaves. And the only language they understand is strength. The council members looked at each other. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, something that looked almost like courage. What do you need from us? Representative Kim asked quietly. Your trust, Yuna said, and your silence. Let us do our job. Let us fight. On the other side of the solar system, High Commander Dralos was growing impatient. He sat on his throne aboard the Eternal Conquest, surrounded by his officers, waiting for the human response. 12 hours he had given them. 8 had already passed. They are still gathering their ships, an officer reported. They show no signs of surrender. Dralos tapped his fingers on the armrest. The bones beneath his touch were cold and smooth. Foolish creatures. Perhaps they need a demonstration. He gestured to his weapons officer. Target one of their outer stations. Something small. A mining outpost. Destroy it. The officer nodded. Yes, High Commander. Moments later, a beam of purple energy shot from the flagship. It crossed the darkness of space in seconds and struck a small station orbiting Neptune. The station exploded in a ball of fire and debris. 300 humans died instantly. Dralos smiled. Send another message. Tell them that was a warning. The next target will be one of their cities. The message was sent. And this time, the response came quickly. But it was not what Dralos expected. Aboard the human flagship Defiance, Captain Taiho Kang watched the destruction of the mining station on his screen. His jaw tightened, his hands gripped the arms of his chair. Around him, his crew sat in stunned silence. 300 people, his first officer, Lieutenant Commander Jiwoo Shin, said softly. They killed 300 people just to make a point. I know, Taiho said. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with cold fury. And they'll kill more if we don't stop them. His communicator beeped. Admiral Park's voice came through. Captain Kang, I assume you saw what happened. I saw, he replied. Good. Then you understand why we can't hold back. These creatures don't respect mercy. They don't understand compassion. The only thing they understand is force. She paused. I'm transmitting the battle plan to all ships. We move in 6 hours. Understood, Admiral. And Captain? I've chosen your ship to deliver our response to their ultimatum. Tai-Ho frowned. Our response? Lieutenant Hana Lim will handle the transmission. I've already briefed her. Just make sure the channel is open and clear. I want every ship in their fleet to hear this. I want the entire galaxy to hear this. What exactly are we sending them? There was a pause. Then Admiral Park laughed. It was a genuine laugh, full of dark amusement. Something they've never heard before, Captain. Something that will make them question everything they think they know about war. The call ended. Tai-Ho sat back in his chair, confused. He looked at Ji-Woo, who shrugged. Lieutenant Lim, Tai-Ho called. Come to the bridge. The Admiral has a job for you. Hana Lim arrived 5 minutes later. She was young, barely 28, with short black hair and sharp eyes. She had been a communications officer for only 3 years, but she was the best in the fleet. She could crack any code, jam any signal, and send messages across distances that should have been impossible. Captain, she said, saluting, Admiral Park briefed me. I'm ready. Ready for what, exactly? Tai-Ho asked. Hana smiled. It was a strange smile, the kind of smile that made Tai-Ho slightly nervous. To send a message, sir. One that Krath will never forget. She walked to her station and began preparing the transmission. Tai-Ho watched her work, still confused. Lieutenant, he said, what exactly is this message? Hana looked up at him. Her smile widened. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. The Krath expect us to beg. They expect us to cry. They expect us to surrender. She turned back to her console. Admiral Park decided to give them something else instead. Something that will break their minds before our weapons break their ships. She finished her preparations and looked at Tai-Ho. Channel is ready, sir. On your order. Tai-Ho took a deep breath. He thought about the 300 people who had just died. He thought about the 2 billion who would be enslaved if they surrendered. He thought about Earth, blue and beautiful, waiting behind him. Open the channel, he said. Hana pressed a button. Channel open, sir. Transmitting to all Krath vessels. Transmitting to all human vessels. Transmitting to the Galactic Network. She paused, then added with a grin, The whole galaxy is listening. And then she pressed play. The sound that came through the speakers of the Eternal Conquest was unlike anything High Commander Dralos had ever heard. At first he thought it was static, interference from human communication systems, perhaps. But then he realized what it was, and his black eyes widened in disbelief. Laughter. Not the nervous laughter of fear, not the desperate laughter of madness. This was deep, genuine, uncontrollable laughter. Thousands of voices laughing together, laughing at him, laughing at his fleet, laughing at the mighty dominion of Krath. Dralos stood frozen. Around him, his officers exchanged confused looks. In 300 years of war, in thousands of conquests, no species had ever responded to their ultimatum with laughter. The laughter continued for 30 seconds. It echoed through every speaker on every Krath ship. It was broadcast across the Galactic Network, reaching millions of species on millions of worlds. Everyone was listening. Everyone heard humanity laugh in the face of extinction. Then the laughter faded, and a woman's voice replaced it. This is Admiral Una Park of the United Earth Defense Fleet. Her voice was calm and cold, like ice over deep water. High Commander Dralos, we received your ultimatum. We found it amusing. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Dralos felt something he had not felt in centuries. He was not sure what it was. It took him a moment to recognize the feeling. Doubt. Admiral Park continued. You have conquered thousands of species. You have destroyed countless civilizations. You have never known defeat. This, I understand, makes you confident. Perhaps even arrogant. She paused. When she spoke again, there was something dangerous in her voice. But you made a mistake. You assumed we were like the others. You assumed we would fear you. You assumed wrong. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Taiho Kang listened with the rest of his crew. He had heard Admiral Park give speeches before. He had heard her calm voice during battle, her precise orders under fire. But he had never heard her sound like this. She sounded like someone who had already won. "Let me tell you about humanity," Park said. "We are a young species. Only a few thousand years of civilization. Nothing compared to your 10,000. But in those few thousand years, we have done things that would make your ancient empire tremble." She let the words hang in the air. "We invented weapons that could destroy our entire planet, and we built them anyway. We fought wars that killed millions of our own kind. We created diseases in laboratories. We split atoms because we were curious what would happen. We went to space not because it was safe, but because it was dangerous." Across the galaxy, aliens listened. Many of them had met humans before. They had seen them smile and trade and shake hands. They had thought humans were peaceful, friendly, harmless. Now they were learning the truth. "You think you understand war?" Park continued. "We invented total war. We invented genocide. We invented weapons so terrible that we had to make rules against using them. And then we broke those rules anyway." On a distant space station, a group of alien merchants watched the broadcast in stunned silence. One of them, an elderly creature with 4 arms, whispered to his companion, "I always thought humans were strange, too cheerful, too friendly. Now I understand. They were hiding." "Hiding what?" his companion asked. "What they really are." Admiral Park's voice grew harder. "You have given us 12 hours to surrender. You have killed 300 of our people to show your strength. You think this will break us? You think this will make us afraid?" She laughed, a single sharp laugh. "We lost 20 million people in a single war, against ourselves. 300 is a tragedy, but it is not a threat. It is a promise. A promise that when this battle is over, we will make you pay for every single life, 10,000 times over." High Commander Drelos finally found his voice. "Enough of this," he roared. "They are trying to confuse us with words. Prepare the fleet for attack." But his officers hesitated. They were still listening. "You want us to kneel?" Park said. "Come and make us. Bring your 5,000 ships. Bring your weapons. Bring everything you have. And when you reach Earth, when you stand before our cities and our people, you will find us waiting, not on our knees, on our feet, with weapons in our hands, and smiles on our faces." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it felt louder than ever. "Because here is the truth, High Commander. You have spent 10,000 years conquering species that feared death. We do not fear death. We have made death into entertainment. We watch horror movies for fun. We tell stories about monsters and ghosts to our children. We celebrate a holiday where we dress up as the dead and laugh about it." She paused. "You cannot intimidate a species that has already stared into the abyss and laughed. You cannot threaten a people who have survived ice ages, plagues, and nuclear weapons. You cannot break a civilization that has been breaking itself for millennia and still stands." Aboard the Defiance, Lieutenant Hannah Lim watched her screens. The transmission was reaching every corner of the galaxy. Billions of beings were listening. She saw something on one of her monitors and smiled. "Captain," she said quietly, "look at this." Taiho leaned over to see. On her screen there were messages, thousands of them. Millions, coming from everywhere, from alien worlds, from space stations, from ships, and they all said the same thing. "They're cheering for us." Hannah nodded. "Every species the Krath has ever oppressed. Every civilization that has lived in fear of them, they're all watching, and they're hoping we win." Admiral Park delivered her final words. "So here is our answer to your ultimatum, High Commander Drelos. We do not surrender. We do not negotiate. We do not kneel. We are humanity. We are the species that crawled out of caves and reached for the stars. We are the species that looked at the universe and said, 'This belongs to us.'" Her voice rose, strong and clear. "You have made a terrible mistake coming here, because we are not your prey. We are not your slaves. We are the most dangerous species this galaxy has ever seen. And you just gave us a reason to prove it." The transmission ended. For a long moment, there was silence across the cosmos. Krath officers stared at their screens. Human soldiers gripped their weapons. Alien observers held their breath. Then, aboard the Defiance, Captain Taiho Kang stood up. He looked at his crew. They looked back at him with fire in their eyes. "You heard the Admiral," he said. "They want to see what we're made of. Let's show them." He activated the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Captain Kang. Weapons hot, engines full. We're not waiting for them to come to us." He paused, and a fierce grin spread across his face. "We're going to meet them halfway, and when we do, we're going to teach the Dominion of Krath a lesson they'll remember for the next 10,000 years." The human fleet moved forward. 3,000 ships, advancing toward 5,000. It was madness. It was suicide. It was exactly what humanity did best. On the observation deck of his flagship, High Commander Drelos watched the human fleet approach. His hands were trembling. He told himself it was anger. He told himself it was eagerness for battle. But deep down, in a place he would never admit existed, he knew the truth. For the first time in 300 years, he was afraid. "All ships," he commanded, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "Attack formation. Show these insects what happens to those who defy the Dominion." The two fleets rushed toward each other. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin, and across the galaxy, everyone watched and waited to see if humanity's laughter had been bravery or madness. They were about to find out. The first shots of the Battle of Sol came from the Krath fleet. Thousands of purple plasma beams lit up the darkness of space, each one hot enough to melt through steel like butter. The light was so bright that it could be seen from Earth, a purple glow spreading across the night sky like an evil sunrise. The human ships should have been destroyed. Every military strategist in the galaxy expected them to be torn apart in the first minute. The Krath had superior numbers, superior firepower, and 10,000 years of combat experience. What they did not have was any idea what was about to happen. The plasma beams reached the human fleet, and then something impossible occurred. The beams passed through the ships, not around them, through them, as if the ships were made of smoke. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, High Commander Drelos leaned forward, his black eyes wide. "What is this? What did we hit?" "Nothing, sir," his weapons officer reported, his voice shaking. "The scans show our weapons passed directly through their vessels, as if they weren't there." "That's impossible." "Yes, sir, it is." Aboard the Defiance, Captain Taiho Kang smiled grimly. The quantum displacement shields were working perfectly. For exactly 0.3 seconds, his ship had existed in a state between dimensions, allowing the enemy fire to pass harmlessly through. "All ships," he commanded, "phase shift successful. Return to normal space and engage." 3,000 human ships flickered back into solid existence, now deep within the Krath formation. The enemy had expected them to be destroyed at range. Instead, they were suddenly everywhere, surrounded by human vessels. "Open fire!" Taiho ordered. The human weapons were nothing like the Krath had seen before. They did not fire plasma or lasers. Instead, they fired graviton pulses, concentrated waves of gravity that crushed enemy ships like paper cups. The first wave of fire destroyed 200 Krath vessels in less than a second. "What are those weapons?" Dralos demanded. "Unknown, sir. We have no data on this technology." "Then get data! Adapt! We are the Dominion of Krath. We do not lose." But the Krath could not adapt fast enough. The human ships moved in patterns that seemed random, unpredictable, impossible to track. They would attack from one angle, then suddenly appear somewhere else. They worked in perfect coordination, each ship covering the others, moving like a single living creature with 3,000 parts. From Station Horizon, Admiral Una Park watched the battle unfold on her holographic display. Her face was calm, but her mind was working at incredible speed, processing thousands of data points, predicting enemy movements, adjusting tactics. "Kang," she said into her communicator, "they're regrouping on your left flank. Draw them in. I want to use the net." "Understood, Admiral." Captain Teho Kang ordered his squadron to retreat. Not flee, but retreat, drawing the Krath ships after them. The enemy, eager for victory after the shock of the first engagement, rushed forward, into the trap. Hidden among the asteroids of the nearby belt, 200 human ships had been waiting. They were small, barely visible to sensors. And each one carried a single weapon, a quantum lock mine. The mines activated. Space itself seemed to twist and freeze around the pursuing Krath ships. The quantum lock held them in place, unable to move, unable to fire, unable to escape. And then the human ships opened fire. 300 Krath vessels were destroyed in that single moment. The explosion was so massive that it created a temporary second sun in the Sol system. On Earth, people looked up at the sky and saw the flash of light. They did not know exactly what was happening, but they knew their fleet was fighting, and they knew their fleet was winning. "The Sol maneuver," Lieutenant Commander Jiwoo Shin said with admiration. "I can't believe it actually worked." "It worked because they underestimated us," Taiho replied. "They expected us to fight like every other species they've conquered. Defensive, careful, afraid." He shook his head. "They don't understand that humans don't fight to survive. We fight to win." Across the battlefield, the Krath were beginning to panic. Their communications were filled with confused reports. Ships that shouldn't exist, weapons that defied physics, tactics that made no sense, and through it all, another sound that terrified them. Music. The human fleet was broadcasting music across all frequencies. Heavy drums, deep voices, war chants from 1,000 cultures, the sound of humanity going to battle. "What is that noise?" a Krath officer demanded. "It appears to be some form of sonic transmission," another replied. "The humans are playing music during combat." "Music? They're playing music while fighting for their lives?" "Yes, sir. They seem to be enjoying themselves." High Commander Dralos listened to the drums beating through his speakers. He had conquered 1,000 worlds. He had watched species beg for mercy. He had seen fear in 1,000,000 eyes, but he had never seen this. A species that made war into a celebration. A species that danced with death instead of running from it. For the first time, he truly understood what Admiral Park had meant. "All ships," he ordered, his voice hollow. "Maximum firepower. Destroy them. Destroy them all." The Krath fleet unleashed everything it had. The space between the fleets became a storm of energy, plasma, missiles, and debris. Human ships began to fall. 10, 20, 50, 100. But for every human ship destroyed, 5 Krath vessels died. On Mars, General Minho Cho led ground forces against a Krath landing party. The enemy had sent troops to establish a foothold on the Red Planet. They expected easy victory. What they found was a nightmare. Human soldiers did not fight like other species. They did not line up in neat formations. They hid. They ambushed. They attacked from shadows and disappeared before the enemy could respond. And when they were cornered, when escape was impossible, they did something that horrified the Krath. They kept fighting anyway. Minho watched a young soldier charge at a Krath warrior 3 times his size. The soldier had no weapon left. His armor was cracked. Blood ran down his face. But he threw himself at the enemy anyway, buying time for his comrades to escape. "Fall back!" Minho shouted. "Get the civilians to the shelters!" The soldier went down, but his sacrifice had given the others the seconds they needed. That was humanity. That was what the Krath could not understand. Humans did not fight for glory. They did not fight for honor. They fought for each other. And they would die for each other without hesitation. Back in space, the tide of battle had fully turned. The Krath fleet, which had arrived with 5,000 ships, now had less than 2,000. Human losses were severe, over 400 ships, but it was nothing compared to the devastation they had caused. High Commander Dralos stood on his bridge, surrounded by screens showing disaster after disaster. His fleet was broken. His tactics had failed. His ancient empire was being humiliated by a species that had barely discovered fire 5,000 years ago. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "Overlord Vastus demands a report." Dralos closed his eyes. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he opened a channel to his master, the ruler of 40,000 stars. "My lord," he said, and his voice cracked for the first time in 300 years. "I have failed you." "Failed?" The voice of Overlord Vastus was ancient and cold. "Explain!" "The humans, my lord, they are not prey. They are not insects." Dralos paused, searching for words to describe what he had witnessed. "They are predators who learned patience. They let us think they were weak. They let us come to them. And now they are destroying us." There was silence on the other end. "Retreat," Vastus finally said. "Save what ships you can. We will regroup and return with a larger force." "My lord, I do not think a larger force will matter. Their technology, their tactics, their very nature, they are unlike anything we have faced." "Then what do you suggest?" Dralos looked out at the battlefield. Human ships moved through the wreckage like sharks through water, hunting down the survivors. "I suggest," he said slowly, "that we find another way. Because if we continue this war, I do not think we will survive it." The transmission ended. Dralos gave the order to retreat. What remained of the Krath fleet turned and fled, leaving behind the wreckage of 3,000 ships and the bodies of millions. On Station Horizon, Admiral Una Park watched them go. Her face showed no triumph, no celebration, only cold satisfaction. "They're running," Minho said through the communicator. "Yes," Park replied, "but they'll be back. And next time, we need to make sure they never threaten anyone again." "How do we do that?" Park turned away from the window. Her eyes were hard and determined. "We take the war to them. We show up at their doorstep. And we make them understand that humanity doesn't just defend. Humanity wins." 3 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy had changed forever. Overlord Vastus sat on his throne in the heart of the Krath homeworld. The palace around him had stood for 8,000 years, built from the bones of conquered species, decorated with trophies from 10,000 victories. It was meant to inspire fear. It was meant to show the power of the Dominion. Now it felt like a prison. Reports came in every day, each one worse than the last. Slave rebellions on 100 worlds, subject species rising up, inspired by what they had seen at Sol. Entire sectors breaking away from Dominion control. And through it all, one word echoed like a curse: humanity. The humans had not stopped at defense. After the Krath fleet retreated, they had followed. Not with their whole force, but with enough ships to make a statement. They had appeared over Krath colony worlds, not to attack, but to broadcast a message. "The Dominion's time is over. Rise up, fight back. We are with you." And the slaves had listened. Vastus had ruled for 2,000 years. He had seen empires fall. He had crushed rebellions without mercy. But this was different. This was not a single uprising or a temporary setback. This was the beginning of the end. "My lord," a servant said, bowing low, "there is a transmission from the human fleet." Vastus waved his hand. "Show me." The holographic display activated. Admiral Una Park appeared before him, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes cold and steady. Behind her, through a window, Vastus could see something that made his ancient heart freeze. Earthships, hundreds of them, floating in orbit over his homeworld. "Overlord Vastus," Park said. Her voice was calm, almost polite. "I believe you know why we're here." "How?" Vastus demanded. "How did you cross the galaxy so quickly? Our territory spans 40,000 light years. It should have taken you decades to reach us." Park smiled. It was the same smile she had shown before the battle, the smile of someone who had already won. "We have been preparing for this moment for 200 years, she said. "Did you think ships and weapons were all we built? We developed engines that fold space itself. We can cross your entire empire in hours, not decades." Vastus felt something he had not experienced since he was young: fear. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to listen carefully," Park replied, "because I am only going to say this once." She stepped closer to the camera, her face filling the display. "The Dominion of Krath is finished. You will release all enslaved species. You will dissolve your military forces. You will surrender your leaders to stand trial for crimes against civilization. And you will do this within 30 days. And if I refuse?" Park's smile vanished. "Then we will do what the Krath have done to others for 10,000 years. We will burn your worlds. We will destroy your ships. We will hunt down every member of your ruling class and end them. And when we are finished, the Dominion will be nothing but a memory and a warning." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You have conquered species who feared you. You have never faced a species that is willing to become worse than you to stop you. We are that species. We have done terrible things to ourselves. We have no limit. We have no breaking point. The only thing holding us back is our choice to be better. And if you force us to make a different choice, you will not survive the consequences." Vastus sat in silence. He thought about his empire. He thought about the generations of conquest, the millions of species crushed beneath his rule. He thought about what it would mean to surrender. And then he thought about what it would mean to fight. He had seen the reports from Sul. He had seen his fleet torn apart by weapons that should not exist. He had heard the laughter of humans in the face of death. He had watched his high commander, a warrior of 300 years, sound afraid for the first time. "You would really destroy everything?" he asked. "Your own values, your own morality? To protect the innocent? To free the enslaved?" "Yes." Park did not hesitate. "We would burn the galaxy to save it. That is what makes us human." There was a long silence. Then Overlord Vastus, ruler of 40,000 stars, conqueror of 10,000 worlds, did something that no Krath leader had done in millennia. He bowed his head. "We surrender." The news spread across the galaxy like fire. The Dominion of Krath had fallen. The greatest empire in history had been brought to its knees by a species that had only reached the stars 200 years ago. On 1,000 worlds, slaves broke their chains. On 1,000 more, oppressed peoples celebrated in the streets. Ships that had served the Dominion turned against their masters. Governors who had ruled through fear suddenly found themselves surrounded by those they had tormented. And through it all, the humans watched. On Earth, there were celebrations, but Admiral Una Park did not join them. She stood on the observation deck of Station Horizon, looking out at the stars. General Minho Cho stood beside her. "We did it," he said quietly. "We actually did it." "We did," Park agreed. "But this is only the beginning. The Dominion's fall will create chaos. There will be power vacuums, new tyrants trying to take their place, old grudges becoming new wars. And humanity's role in all of this?" Park turned to face him. "That depends on us. The Galactic Council has offered us a seat. They want us to lead. They saw what we did to the Krath, and now they're afraid we'll do the same to them." "Will we?" "No." Park shook her head. "We didn't fight to become conquerors. We fought to be free and to give others that same freedom." She walked to the window and pressed her hand against the glass. "I declined the Council's offer. We don't want to rule. We don't want an empire. We just want the galaxy to know one thing." "What's that?" She looked at him, and for the first time since the battle she smiled. A real smile, tired but genuine. "That if anyone ever threatens the innocent, if any empire ever rises to enslave others, we will be there. Not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as the thing that monsters fear, the thing that waits in the darkness, ready to strike." Minho nodded slowly. "A warning. The only kind that matters." Far across the galaxy, Captain Tai-Ho Kang returned to Earth with his crew. The Defiance had been damaged in the battle, scarred by Krath weapons, but still flying. He had been offered a promotion, a desk job, a comfortable retirement. He had refused. "I belong on a ship," he told the Admiral when she asked why. "Out there, among the stars. That's where I can do the most good." Lieutenant Hana Lim became famous. Her voice, the one that had transmitted humanity's laughter to the galaxy, was recognized everywhere. She was offered interviews, book deals, political positions. She declined them all. "I'm just a communications officer," she said with a shrug. "I pressed a button. The real heroes are the ones who fought." But the galaxy did not forget. They could not forget. On Earth, a monument was built in the center of the new capital. It was simple. A bronze statue of a human figure, head thrown back, mouth open in laughter, facing the stars. Beneath it, a simple inscription: "We do not kneel." Years passed, decades. The galaxy slowly rebuilt itself. The freed slaves formed new nations, new alliances, new governments. Some of them looked to humanity for guidance. Others kept their distance, uncertain of the species that had defeated the Dominion. But no one ever tried to invade Earth again. One day, many years after the battle, an old alien merchant visited the monument with his grandchild. The child, small and curious, looked up at the laughing figure and asked, "Who is that?" The merchant smiled. He remembered watching the transmission all those years ago. Remembered the shock he had felt hearing humans laugh at the Krath. "That is why no one threatens Earth," he said, "because humans are different from the rest of us. We look at death and we despair. We look at impossible odds and we surrender." He pointed at the statue. "They look at death and laugh. They look at impossible odds and charge forward anyway. They are the craziest, most terrifying, most wonderful species in the galaxy." "Are they dangerous?" the child asked. "Very," the merchant said, "but only to those who threaten the innocent. To everyone else, they are the best friends you could ever have." The child thought about this for a moment. Then she looked up at the statue again, at the human laughing at the stars. "I like them," she decided. The merchant laughed. "So do I, little one, so do I." And across the galaxy, humanity continued to watch the stars, ready to defend, ready to fight, ready to laugh in the face of any darkness that dared to rise, because that was what it meant to be human, not the fear of death, the defiance of it.